You've clicked onto this video for one of two reasons. One, you're the minority, like me, and you're absolutely enthralled with Zack Snyder's vision for the DCEU. Or two, you've come to watch a failed attempt at someone trying to justify why Batman v Superman was a good movie, and you're already halfway through typing that negative comment about why it wasn't. Well, if you're the latter, I urge you to hold off hitting that send button and hear me out. A last-ditch attempt to argue for the unpopular opinion. Must there be a Batman v Superman? It's been a rocky road for DC, and not admitting that would be a fault in this entire argument. Between Batman v Superman's mixed reception, the throwaway story and antagonist of Suicide Squad, and all the controversy between Zack Snyder walking away from Justice League, Ben Affleck stepping down from director's chair of the untitled Batman film, and unverified rumors of him leaving, Joss Whedon stepping in to finish Zack's movie, and Henry Cavill's mustache during Justice League, extensive reshoots, and now even him departing from the role, there's been more than a handful of problems behind the scenes with Warner Brothers. This video will argue why Batman v Superman is a quality film and worth your time and attention. Maybe not as a movie you can watch until the end of time, but a gem within the plethora of comic book movies for doing something different and capturing a new sense of emotion and depth never before seen. Also, quick note before we move on, I will be referencing the ultimate cut of the movie. Some of the narrative of this movie got really messed up in the theatrical release, so I will consider the ultimate edition as the cut the director intended for release. I mean, entire subplots barely even exist in the theatrical cut or are entirely absent, like Clark Kent going to Gotham to talk to citizens about Batman, or even the fact that Lex Luthor set up Wallace Keefe and the woman from Nairobi, Kenya, who testifies against Superman. Yeah, that's totally skimmed over. If you haven't seen it, you probably didn't even know about it. So, if you haven't watched the 3-hour Ultimate Cut, please go watch it. Do yourself a favor. In my opinion, it's the best version of the film, and it's really the one that deserves your attention. If you're looking for the best viewing experience of this movie, the Ultimate Cut is your answer. In 2008, the bigwigs at Warner Brothers began talks on creating what would be known as the DC Entertainment Universe, or DCEU. After the success of Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, as well as the first Iron Man movie from Marvel later that year, WB knew they needed a plan for future films if they wanted to compete with Marvel's cinematic universe. The Dark Knight and its sequel, The Dark Knight Rises, would prove there was a market for serious, darker, and more modern adaptations of comic book superheroes. Christopher Nolan and writer David Goyer began to converse about possible concepts for a modern representation of the Man of Steel, just like they did a few years ago with the Caped Crusader. Nolan pitched the idea, and WB hired Nolan and Goyer onto the project. By 2010, WB began to search for a director to head their new line of DC projects. There were many candidates such as Duncan Jones and Matt Reeves, but WB went with a director who already had a track record with adaptations of popular graphic novels, one of which included DC characters, Zack Snyder. At the time, Zack Snyder was known for 300 and Watchmen, two extremely well-received movies released long before the comic book movie boom. In 2013, Man of Steel released, giving birth to a never-before-seen take on Superman. This created a foundation for the future, with Superman as our Atlas holding the weight of what was to come on his shoulders. There were hints all over Man of Steel referencing the wider world of DC and its characters, teasing fans not unlike what Marvel did with Iron Man. At San Diego Comic-Con in 2013, in DC's Hall H panel, we were teased with a singular logo. A Man of Steel Superman-esque shield appeared on screen, only to be eclipsed by a Dark Knight Returns-esque Batman logo. The crowd lost it. It was happening. Son of Krypton versus Bat of Gotham. Something the world had only dreamed of until this moment. The dawn of justice. Batman v Superman begins with a scene we've all seen many times over. The murder of the Waynes. The death of a boy. The birth of the Bat. Many people complain about the whole Martha thing. Why would our parents having the same name stop me from killing you, or make me see reason as to why we should work together? Let me try and shed some light on this. There was a time above, a time before. There were perfect things.
diamond absolutes. Things fall. Things on Earth. And what falls is fallen.
The murder of the Waynes is very different from what we've seen before. The Waynes are usually exiting the Monarch Theater and taking a shortcut through what would be known as the famed Crime Alley. A man we assume to be the thug Joe Chill walks opposite of the Waynes with an intent to do harm. He pulls his sidearm from his coat. Thomas steps forward to defend his wife and child and lunges forward with a clenched fist. A single bullet wounds Thomas as he falls to the ground. Martha attempts to shield her son from harm, jumping at Chill and pushing his gun down to no avail. Chill raises it and slides it under her pearl necklace. Martha stares in horror as she braces for what comes next. The slide of the gun breaks the pearls. A metaphor. A family is broken. A child's life is destroyed. A hope for the city of Gotham is shattered. The perfect thing is crushed. The diamond absolute is broken. As Martha lays on the ground breathing her last breath, Thomas reaches for her and says his last word.
Martha
is fallen. Martha dies first, and Bruce watches as she's systematically executed. The last word he hears his father speak was his mother's name, Martha. A traumatic event ingrained that name in Bruce's head. PTSD has many symptoms, and I would imagine just the mere mention of the name in any situation would cause Bruce to be taken back to the alley where his family died, where Bruce died, where the perfect thing was crushed. I think the last thing he would want on his worst enemy is to experience what he did. He would wear the Callan cape so that no person would ever go through what he did again, even Superman. This is the defining moment of the Batman, the crux of his mission. There's even a scene when Bruce visits his parents' mausoleum outside of the abandoned Wayne Manor. A man-bat creature breaks through Martha's grave, a sign that her death haunts him most. This whole scene establishes tone and emotion that carries on through the rest of the film. This movie isn't just a popcorn flick, but requires thought and reflection. These aren't just superheroes. They're people, like you and me. They are modern myths deconstructed. This is the modernization of the comic book film. Now, I won't be combing over this entire movie scene by scene, but the first few scenes set up everything we need to know. We see where Batman's coming from. It's not just about his origin, it's about what happens after that. Way after that. The text that appears on screen reads, Metropolis. Mankind is introduced to the Superman. As if this event is some game changer on par with 9/11, and Snyder wants to portray exactly that. The sudden emergence of aliens with incredible powers is a world-changing event. Humanity discovers they are not alone by two aliens fighting within the city, absolutely decimating parts of it, as shown in Man of Steel. Bruce Wayne rushes headfirst to a Wayne building within Metropolis. We even see some crossover with a different angle of the exact scene from Man of Steel. Snyder, right off the bat, is portraying this scene as the bridge between the two movies, as well as the bridge between one movie and the rest of the universe. It conveys what it would be like to be at ground zero during a catastrophe of this scale. It would make even the richest or the most powerful man feel weak, powerless, angry. Bruce gets out of his car and sees a crowd of people stopping and staring. They're looking at the world engine, which just stopped functioning. This parallels 9/11. Droves of people stopping and staring in shock as the second plane makes contact with the World Trade Center. The clouds of dust and smoke from destroyed buildings roll in the streets. Zod and Superman are locked in combat, and everything they touch is collateral damage. God versus God. Bruce rushes headfirst to assist, saving a man crushed by a steel beam who will come into play later, and a little girl stuck in debris. Bruce asks where her mother is. She says nothing and points upward. She's gone. Bruce embraces the child and looks upwards towards the heavens. He sees the monsters. The threat is identified. A scowl. The hatred sets in as the Batman theme comes pounding in the background. The stage is set. There are new rules now. Snyder knows music is important to a film. Batman v Superman is no exception. The master himself, Hans Zimmer, returned from Man of Steel to produce the score alongside co-composer Junkie XL. A name you probably never heard of. Also known as Tom Holkenborg, Junkie XL has worked on movies like Mad Max Fury Road, Deadpool, Black Mass, and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Together, Zimmer and XL create an iconic score that builds tension and epicness unlike anything seen in any other superhero film. Let me fucking tell you, as somebody who loves soundtracks and scores, this is the apex for comic book film scores. We get the iconic theme from Wonder Woman, as well as the powerful themes for Superman carried over from Man of Steel. And even Lex and Batman receive their own extremely unique themes that symbolize and embody their characters perfectly. When you hear them, you know who it is. It's not generic like most Marvel film scores are. It has heart, and the composers behind it really captured the emotion that each piece needed to have. The simple, or shall I say short version of the plot of Batman v Superman is that Lex Luthor is manipulating Batman and Superman to beat each other's throats. He manipulates the public to see him as the hero. Lex is not your average guy. Clearly. He's a man with a mission, an agenda, an idea, and we get that pretty fast as he begins to pitch his plan to weaponize kryptonite, which Senator Finch denies. Lex Luthor Jr. gets what he wants, or at least will do whatever it takes to see that he does. Lex isn't your average villain either. He never directly confronts anyone physically in the film, which is pretty interesting. It's all about what he does behind the scenes with his words and actions. Jesse Eisenberg's Lex is the arch-villain, outwitting and outthinking his opponents at every turn. He's one step ahead until the climax. More than that, he wins. Lex's motivations are interesting and complex. It's not just about disliking Superman and getting rid of him. Obviously, that's a huge part of it, but it's about proving himself to his peers, to society, and to his deceased parents. He is out to put the names LexCorp and Luthor on everyone's tongues. He doesn't want to live as a weakling or in his father's shadow. He's gone, and it's his turn to carry the torch any way he can. The Red Capes are coming. Personally, one of my favorite parts of this film happens to be the most loaded, and it's the main reason why this movie is a turnoff for non-comic book fans. The nightmare scene, of course. It's the world building scene to show the wider events and where we're headed, i.e. the Justice League. Bruce Wayne begins the supposed dream while falling asleep at his computer, waiting for Lex's drive to finish decrypting. Batman, clad with an assault rifle and trench coat, emerges from an underground bunker in a post-apocalyptic world. Singed into the earth is a symbol any DC comic book fan would know. Omega. Darkseid. Batman meets up with a convoy to obtain what he believes is kryptonite. It's a trap, and Superman's loyalist soldiers raid the convoy alongside a swarm of aerial creatures comic book fans would know as parademons. Batman guns them down and kills a few soldiers and is eventually overwhelmed and captured. He's held captive with 2 other soldiers. Enter Superman. His soldiers kneel as he passes them. Without saying a word, he kills the men beside Batman with his eye lasers. This clearly isn't the Man of Steel we know. Superman reveals that he blames Batman for Lois Lane's death, and then unmasks him. He touches the bullet-dented bat symbol, and then clenches his fist to Batman's chest. Bruce awakens to a disturbance.
Listen to me now! It's Lois! It's Lois Lane! She's the key! Am I too soon? No! I'm too soon! You're right about him! You've always been right about him! Fear him! Find us, Bruce! You have to find us!
When I first saw this, I jumped in my seat and I yelled loud, "Is this the fucking Flash?" Because it was. At this point, Ezra Miller was confirmed to play the Scarlet Speedster in the DCU and was set to appear in Batman v Superman to some degree. We didn't really know exactly what. This was it. A flash out of time from the nightmare with a warning to Bruce. It's Lois. She's the key. You were right. You were right about him. You were always been right about him. Fear him. You have to find us. A call to action to Bruce that he must form the Justice League earlier than originally intended. Before this moment, that dream was their future. Or at least that's how I interpret it. But Flash altered the timeline of that world. The future we saw in that dream was an injustice-like world where Lois Lane's death made Superman snap. Superman has allied with Darkseid. His followers have donned a Nazi-esque aesthetics, donning his symbol on their forearm like an armband, and wearing the Stahlhelm helmet traditionally worn by Nazi soldiers during World War II. Batman's capture also resembles Christ's crucifixion, with him in the middle and 2 others at his side. This imagery paints a bleak future and what a world would look like if Superman was a villain. But as a comic book fan, I understand this, and I get instantly what Snyder is trying to convey with this scene. But the common moviegoer will not get any of this. And it's totally understandable and acceptable. It's 100% loaded. It requires outside knowledge of DC Comics because none of these things have ever been explained or even hinted at within the movies, as we haven't even had enough movies or on-screen time to do any universe establishing. While I really enjoy the scene personally, it's one of the movie's biggest negatives. Snyder does something interesting in this movie that I don't think many comic book movies have really done to an extent. After the scene at Lex Luthor's party, Clark leaves to go rescue people from a burning factory in Mexico, and Superman brings back a woman he saved to the crowd. The crowd gathers, awestruck, praising and thanking him to a level of worship. I saw this movie twice in theaters, and the second time I took a girl I was seeing at the time to go see it, and she turned to me and said, "You know, this is what would actually happen." She was of Latina descent, so she was speaking from personal experiences and how she was raised. I didn't have a hard time seeing her point, and I thought about it. She was right. The people extended an arm as if Christ himself had intervened, to touch a being of much greater power than ourselves. It should be impossible, yet here he is. A god walks among us. And during this news montage, scholars, scientists, filmmakers, and Neil deGrasse Tyson himself discuss how big of a deal this is. What does this do to our god complex? A woman and her family are stuck in a natural disaster, and painted on their roof is Superman's S. She reaches upwards and towards the heavens crying, and there's Superman, posed to look like God descending from the sun and the sky above to save us, our savior. Our canon is challenged. But what if he's just a guy trying to do the right thing? That is what Zack Snyder wants us to be asking. Who is Superman? A god, a man, the most powerful being on the planet, a misunderstood kid from Kansas trying to do the right thing? It's up for you to answer that question for yourself. Must there be a Superman? Besides the film's titular characters, we do have the appearance of a third hero, or should I say heroine. Wonder Woman makes her first film appearance in BVS, portrayed by the lovely Gal Gadot. Wonder Woman is the wild card character of the movie, who is watching and waiting to make a move. We see her a few times at Lex's charity party of his donation to the Library of Metropolis, in his meta file, and at the auction where Bruce Wayne encounters her. We see and hear her in her full glory once Doomsday appears. Iconic in every sense of the word, she provides context to the DCEU. She had given up on man long ago and was in hiding. Her armor colors are muted and dirty, as if they were battle-worn and dated, embodying her outlook on humanity. We see the reasons why she is cynical in her solo film, with some retconning toward the end. She connects us to the mystical and magical in an indirect manner. Wonder Woman is looking for a reason to defend man once again, and I think she finds it with Superman's death in a similar manner to Bruce Wayne. Men are still good. Batman is portrayed very different in this interpretation of the Caped Crusader. Batman is a veteran vigilante and has seen more than his fair share of injustices on the streets of Gotham during his time as Batman. 20 years in Gotham, Alfred. We've seen what promises are worth. How many good guys are left? How many stayed that way? There is a true contrast between this scene and the end of the film. Batman has gone against most, if not all, of his rogues gallery, and he's been through at least one or two Robins based on the Batsuit on display in the cave. Either Dick Grayson or Jason Todd was killed by the Joker and Harley Quinn, which is revealed to us in Suicide Squad. Also, Jason Todd may have become Red Hood and betrayed Batman. Regardless of the finer details, Batman has seen some shit, which is why he's more ruthless, darker, and more willing to bring pain to whoever stands in his way. This really shows in the fight scene in the warehouse where Batman rescues Martha Kent from KG Beast, the Bat of Gotham. We've reached the climax, where the plot concludes through a resolution and the movie ends. A point of reflection, a fight between the Son of Krypton and the Bat of Gotham. Fight Night. The greatest gladiator match in the history of the world. Sponsored by Alexander Luthor Jr. Lex challenges the notion of God. God is tribal. God takes sides. God is a power who was never there for him in his most trying times as a child. If God is all-powerful, he cannot be all good. And if he is all good, he cannot be all-powerful. His manipulation of Bruce Wayne, Clark Kent, Batman, and Superman is complete, from the public eye to their hearts. But to no avail. Superman and Batman redirect their attention toward the real threat. Lex Luthor creates a creature that embodies the abomination inside him. Superman's Doomsday, the bane of God. The Trinity uses their combined might to fell Doomsday using Batman's kryptonite spear, which was fashioned to kill the Man of Steel. But at what cost? The music, the imagery of Superman as Christ, being taken down from the cross in his red cloak, head cradled by Lois as Mary, whereas Wonder Woman is Mary Magdalene and Batman is Joseph. They mourn the death of a hero. Notice the electric posts resembling the crosses in the back? The scene is perfect and embodies the film, its emotion, its heart, its purpose. You must lose yourself in order to be reborn. The movie is about 3 orphan boys dying and being born again as new beings, finding their calling, their purpose, what they think is just and good, and acting on that drive and will, and making sure what happened to them never happens again. So I ask again, must there be a Batman v Superman? In my opinion, yes. If you made it to the end of the video, I thank you. If it made you think about this movie more than you previously had, or maybe change your mind completely, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Even if it didn't change it, I want to hear what you have to say. I always felt my opinion of BVS was strong enough to justify this essay, and I wanted to get it out. Too many times have I found myself in discussions in real life and online where I debated the validity and quality of this movie, but I never really could truly get my opinion and thoughts out, especially on the fly. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice will always be in my top list of comic book movies, and I'll always remember it for being so different and daring in a world where the MCU dominated the semi-serious and comedic style, and DC tried to be the more serious and darker style, as the comic books have been since the early days of the publisher. But alas, we know how that ended. It was a perfect thing, until it wasn't.
Must there be a Superman?
There is.